Are you ready to vibe? You're listening to Creepy Vibes Only. Well, listeners, welcome back to episode 2 of Creepy Vibes Only.
Hello.
I'm Emma.
And I'm Steph.
And we're here to vibe with you and tell you about what's been keeping us up at night.
Yes.
So, Steph, what's been keeping you up at night this week?
Well, let me think. Okay. The one reason why I can't sleep lately is because I've decided to reorganize my closet. And now I can't close the door to my closet anymore because I thought it was a great idea. But now I will lay at night and just think of what happens if someone breaks in, because I can't hide anymore. The closet was my go-to space. So now I have to fight it. Whoever comes in.
Yeah, because that closet door truly was the Fort Knox of your house. That was going to make the difference.
Spot. There's a little spot in the corner I could hide.
Well,
and now not anymore.
It's good that you have shared your hiding spot with the world.
It's not there anymore. I need to find a new one.
God.
Why are you not sleeping at night? What's keeping you up?
So... For those of you who don't know, I have a 95-pound Labradoodle who, because it's winter, in spite of the fact that he has the fur of a polar bear, is getting cold at night. So I will literally wake up to this gigantic creature basically lying on top of me and smothering me. And I cannot get a lick of space in my own bed because I have no boundaries with that dog, it seems.
So you need a king-size bed.
But that's not it. I have a pretty big bed. It's just he's I must snuggle you. It's cold.
You need a smaller dog.
Yeah, well, I can't have that now. It's a little too late.
Oh, he is cute. Freaking massive.
Yeah. Well, Steph.
Yes.
Just like last week's episode, involved cannibalism in a degree. Not intentionally. This one does too.
That's nice. That's nice.
So, I'm going to regale you with the Scottish legend of Sawney Bean.
Oh,
are you ready?
Yes.
So, picture this. It is the 16th century in Scotland. And Sawney Bean is he's said to be the head of a pretty big clan. So not pretty big. I guess, I don't know. I'm not a clan expert, but a clan of a relatively large number of people. So according to Wikipedia, and thanks to Wikipedia, because that's where I got most of this information, 45 people. And
okay.
I want you to guess how many people it's listed in a ballpark that he and these 45 people cannibalized. In 25 years. It was 25 years.
In 25 years?
Yeah.
See, I was going to say themselves, but now since there's 25 years, 100?
Higher.
No!
Yeah, how many? Guess again. I like this game.
500?
It's higher than that.
No.
Yeah.
Why did it stop them?
We'll get into that. So it's over 1,000.
How?
Well, we'll get there. Okay. So some background on Sawney Bean. So he was born Alexander Bean, and he was born in this part of Scotland called East Lothian, which is shockingly along the east coast of Scotland. his father was a ditch digger and hedge trimmer, so he was kind of a guy that worked with his hands. And he Sonny Bean tried to kind of continue that trade, but I guess it just wasn't right for him. Apparently, he eventually shacked up with a woman who went by the name Black Agnes Douglas,
wow.
who apparently was also not a great person, and like many other women, was accused of being a witch.
Oh?
So they started off their journey of killing and eating people pretty early into their relationship.
As you do in any healthy relationship.
Yeah, like, you know, like there's like the dating phase, there's the like honeymoon phase, and then there's the cannibalization phase, and it's just part of the general tide of things.
It's probably why none of my relationships worked out. We never got to that phase. So...
Well, remind me not to like be around when you start seeing people after the pandemic. So, early on in the relationship, they actually ended up shacking up in a coastal cave, and it was in this kind of area called Bonney Head. The cave was pretty big. So it was about 200 meters deep, and the entrance would get blocked off by water during the high tide, so they could live there pretty well without being able to be found. And they lived there for 25 years.
Oh my God.
So together, they ended up having 8 sons and 6 daughters. And then 18 grandsons and 14 granddaughters, and apparently there was a whole lot of incest.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, was there like anybody else there?
It's not clear if they ended up like recruiting people. It sounds like, based on my research, that it was mostly this like family just growing and growing, and like they would be like, all right, little Jimmy, it's time to kill your first victim. Like, that was kind of just their vibe, which is full. Yeah. And they were great. So they would basically sustain themselves by ambushing, killing, and robbing people like at nighttime. So when the tide like was out and they could get out of their cave, and then they would bring like the bodies and like all the goods that they'd stolen back to their cave, where they would I'll put it delicately, process their bounty and continue to sustain themselves. So because they were like really good at sneaking and doing this, like people were like, oh, like I guess Gladys is missing now, we can't find her. And like there's basically no evidence to go with, because like if you think of the way like a beach works, like as soon as that tide comes in, like you can't find them.
Yeah.
And you can't even access them. So people were like obviously noticing things were happening, and they were like looking for people. And according to the legend, apparently one search, like actually someone was like, hey, like look at that cave. And people were like, you know what? No, like who's going to live in a cave? Like no one could survive that. And they never actually went and looked inside it.
And I mean, like whoever, like good for them. Because I feel like if someone did go there, they would have never came back.
1,000,000%.
There's too many of them waiting.
Just like in the caverns, like bats, like, hello. Welcome to our lair. Sorry, I'm also like making light of this, and I think it's my coping mechanism because it's so gross and grim. So I'm not trying to be...
This is a comedy podcast, so we are going to make light of things that we shouldn't necessarily have to, or should, but you know.
Yeah. Again, and this is also a legend. So we don't think this is necessarily true. Unfortunately, according to the legend, the people like in their pursuit of like finding the culprit executed several innocent people. But obviously, like even though they were killing like these like executing these people and killing them, like the disappearances and killings and robberies like weren't stopping. And people like innkeepers were often like suspected of this, because they would have been a lot of the people who would see like the missing people the last time they were seen alive. So this continued, as mentioned, for 25 years, thereabouts, until the beans ambushed the wrong people. So I guess there was like some sort of like fair or event, and a married couple was riding through one night. Unfortunately, when they were attacked, the beans did kill the wife, but the husband was like super good with a gun. Like they had pistols back then and swords, so he was a really good fighter, and he was able to fight them off. And they kind of just like held his own until a large group from that fair came on the trail, basically scaring off the beans. So
good for them.
Yeah, right. So this group that like is like, oh my god, man, like holy shit, and they bring him to the local magistrate, and they were like, yo, we think we know who's been doing this stuff, because like there's witnesses, there's a survivor now. So with them kind of like being found now, it didn't take very long before the king at the time, and they think it was likely James VI, like based on the timelines, because it was in the 16th century, so between the 1500s and 1600s. Okay. But it could have been later on. So once the king heard what was going on, he was like, fuck this shit, and sent 400 men and like a bunch of bloodhounds to investigate. Like he was like, nope, not today, Satan. We're gonna find them. This is gross. So they found the beans. I feel like I keep saying the beans, and I'm just like imagining a bunch of like pinto beans, like with like angry eyes and like fangs, like. Eh. So they found them in that overlooked cave, thanks to the bloodhounds. So once they got in the cave with their torchlights, they found the Bean clan. And of course, this cave was awful. It was horrible on the inside. So there were human remains everywhere. There were body parts hanging from the walls. There were like literal barrels full of limbs. There were like pickled people and like heads and organs. Yeah, I know. It was like a fucking haunted house. And of course, like there were piles of stolen goods. So there was like jewelry and clothing and all sorts of stuff. So there's two kind of versions of where things go once they're found. So in one, people were like, nope, placed gunpowder and like explosives all over the front of the cave and exploded it. And then the cave like basically like kind of crumbled in, and that the clan suffocated in there. The more common one is that the clan was like, the Beans were fully captured alive, and they just like, they didn't even fight. They were just like, all right, you got us, rats. And they were taken to the toll booth jail in Edinburgh. After that, they were transferred to either Leith or Glasgow, where they were promptly executed without trial, according to Wikipedia. So people were just like, nope, we don't need to try these guys. It's like, that's it. We already like people, because of like what they had done, like people didn't even see them as humans. Like they were like monsters.
Can you imagine them trying to like defend, like, oh, this is the arm I found in the bush the other day. Like, how do you want them to defend themselves?
Yeah, exactly. So their punishment was pretty gruesome. So I don't know, Steph, like grab a pillow or something. So Sonny, so Alexander, whatever you want to call him, and the other men had their genitals cut off. And then they were burned. Their hands and their feet were cut so that they would bleed to death.
Oh my God.
And allegedly, Sonny's dying words, or his like last words, were, "It isn't over. It will never be over."
Oh, I don't like that. He's coming back as a ghost.
You can cover that in a later episode. We're not going to touch that. And Agnes, so his wife, her fellow women, and the children, which I find actually, like, I feel sad the children were killed. Like, I feel like
they were bred in that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know, but they were basically burned alive, like a witch would be.
Like, it's one of those situations where like you feel bad for them, but at the same time, like you can't because they ate people.
Yeah, I mean, like I personally, like, I don't support the death penalty.
Yeah,
but it's fucking wild. All of this, and like what they did was just like atrocious.
Spooky. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's a town actually near that cave which you can visit. Like, it's a like Benin Head. Oh, sorry, Benin Head. Like that cave is like a like landmark now. But there's a town called Girvan which is near like that area, and they have another Bean clan, which is basically that one of his daughters actually did like get out of the clan and settled like in that town of Girvan, and she planted a dill tree that became famous as the Hairy Tree.
Okay.
And once her family got caught, apparently she was known by the angry locals, and they hung her from that tree.
No, she fucking got out.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
It's a bummer, Em.
Oh, it's gross. So there is like I said, like there's a lot of debate on whether or not like this story is true or if it's a legend or but either way, it's a very famous one. And actually did have some influence in popular culture. So there's like influence in the movie The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which has like similar cannibalism and similar like stories of like robbing people and keeping their remains. There's a movie that we should watch called The Hills Have Eyes, Steph, which I'm sure you would love.
No.
And Sonny Bean was the inspiration for that movie. And there is an anime which is called Attack on Titan. And one of the characters actually names these two titans that she captures Sonny and Bean. And in that show, I guess like the titans eat people.
Okay. Yum, yum. Oh, yes.
So that's the story of Sonny Bean.
I like want to say very nice, but no.
No.
It was a short story, which I appreciate because it's horrible.
Yeah, like I didn't want to like drag it out. Yeah, it's a gross one.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's okay. We'll go to Scotland and we'll visit it, Steph. Go to the cave.
Imagine tourists, like a tour, I mean, like, this is what people died and 8 people.
But like they literally have like tours and stuff you can go on. Yeah. Listen.
Like, I understand like going to visit like haunted places and that kind of stuff because like you don't know if it's true or not. It is just fun. But like going to a place where like this is where this person killed someone, like, ugh.
Okay, but a lot of haunted places are the sites of some pretty like like think about like the LaLaurie Mansion.
Yeah.
And NOLA.
Like
it's haunted AF because some horrible AF stuff happened there.
It's all like tied together.
Exactly. It's okay, Steph. So what you want to tell me about?
Okay. So for today's story, we are going to travel to Shag Harbour. It's a little fishing community on the south shore of Nova Scotia. It's got a population of around like 450 people, so very small. And the reason why we know of Shag Harbour today and why it has this reputation isn't because of their ghost stories, their ghost ships, their giant sea serpents, or their man-eating squids. It's actually because of the events of the night that occurred on October 4th, 1967. So to start off the story, I'm going to start with, so research-wise, I watched a documentary, which I won't say the name right now because it's going to like reveal my story.
Okay.
So watch the documentary, and then I've read like a bunch of articles, and it's very, very interesting if you guys like want to do your own research after this. But to start off, let's start with this next little quote. There were many strange lights in the sky over Nova Scotia that night, but for the people of Shag Harbour, those lights would fall to the earth, and the eyes of the world would fall on Shag Harbour. So this was from the documentary, The Shag Harbour UFO, the true incident. Yes. So, sidebar, I am not someone that really likes UFO stories. Like, I don't know, like they just don't attract me. But when I was reading this one, it's a wild ride. It's very interesting. So let's begin. So on that evening of October 4th, 1967, there were multiple eyewitnesses that saw four strange lights flying across Nova Scotia. In Dartmouth, I'm not sure how to say it.
It's Dartmouth.
Dartmouth? Okay. So in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Chris Stiles, who was 12 at the time, he saw the lights travel along the harbor from inside his house. He raced outside of his house to reach the water because he wanted a better vantage point to see what it was. Stiles remembers standing completely still and feeling what he described as real fear inside of him. When he was watching the lights, he sensed that he should not be seeing what he was seeing and that he was too close. As he watched a huge orange sphere trace the shoreline, it suddenly shot towards him and then disappeared into the sky. The next morning, Chris got a call from his grandfather, who said that he also saw the strange lights in Shag Harbour, but one of the lights actually crashed in the water. In Mason's Beach, Nova Scotia, Wilfred Eisner and two of his friends were getting ready to burn an old boat when they noticed strange lights in the sky. Eisner at the time had his camera because he was planning on taking pictures of the boat, so he managed to actually take a picture of the lights that he saw. The picture he took is a 5-minute time exposure, and in the documentary they do show it. And you see 3 round lights, one small and orange, another 2 bigger ones. One is purple and one is a bluish color, as well as a lot of orange streaks in the picture. Eisner explained that these streaks were actually the stars and that moved throughout that 5-minute exposure with the Earth due to the Earth's rotation, and that the small orange round object in the picture was actually another star that just happened to be stationary. However, the other 2 objects that were much bigger and of a different color are the UFOs in that picture. They said that upon examining the picture itself, you can see that, well, if you look back at what happened and then you look at the picture, the object were just had hovered in place for 5 minutes. And that is not something that any, like a helicopter, a plane can just do. They don't just stand still in that one spot for a long period of time. So Eisner believes that he did take a picture of the UFOs, but it probably wasn't the one that crashed into Shag Harbour. And then the interesting thing of this eyewitness event is that what he saw and what he captured actually took place an hour before what happened in Shag Harbour. So now that we traveled along the little town surrounding Shag Harbour, let's go to actually what happened there. So Laurie Wickens, who's a local fisherman, but at the time he was much younger, he was driving home from a dance with friends. As they were driving, they noticed 4 lights flash in a sequence, one after another, along the highway. Wickens said that the lights followed the vehicle for a good amount of time until they suddenly dove at a 45-degree angle towards the water. So once they saw the craft or whatever it was basically like dive into the water, well, they saw there's a mountain, so they didn't see it crash into the water, but they assumed they went in the water. At that point, Wickens and his friend, they didn't think they saw a UFO. They thought that they just saw a plane crash into the water, and they just saw this horrible plane crash. So they raced towards a location where it crashed. At the same time, they had called the RCMP to notify them of the accident. It turns out that they were the first call of multiple calls to the RCMP to notify them of a plane crash. At the same time, RCMP Constable Round Pound was driving down Highway 3.
Wait, what's his name?
Round Pound. What did I say?
Round Pound. Is that his name?
Ron Pound.
Round Pound. You can appreciate my wait a second.
There's some different. Oh my god, I'm French. Listen, okay.
There's something strange in your neighborhood. Who are you gonna call? Round.
You hear my snort?
Yeah. Tabernacle.
Oh my god. Focus. At the same time, RCMP Constable Ron Pound was driving down Highway 3.
Ron Pound the Constable?
Did I say wrong? Constable?
Constable? The Count?
Constable.
The Count.
Con. Like a con. Okay. Again.
Ron the Con.
Stop it.
Stop? Okay, sorry. It's just really funny.
At the same time, RCMP Constable Ron Pound was driving down Highway 3 on his way to Shag Harbour. And he witnessed the strange lights as well. He saw 4 lights attached to a flying craft that was about 60 feet long. The lights flew along the highway to then suddenly dip down towards the water. So Constable Pound, along with Police Corporal Victor Ferbicki and Constable Ron O'Brien, responded to the multiple calls of the plane crash. When they arrived at the site of the crash, there was already a crowd of residents overlooking the water. They expected to see a plane, pieces, they expected to see a wreckage and just this horrible, horrible sight. But what they actually saw was a pale yellow light slowly moving 8 feet above the water. The light was moving under its own power in the direction of the ebbing tide, but at a slightly faster rate. Even more bizarre than the light was the wide trail of yellow foam that followed it. People kept on looking until the light just vanished. People thought that either the craft had moved too far away for them to see at night, or that it was submerged. Immediately, onlookers sprang into action, as they thought people would be in the water. So they went into full search and rescue mode, because no one at that point was thinking UFO. They just thought that it was this horrible thing that had happened. So local fisherman Lawrence Smith was just about to go to bed when he got a call that there's a plane crash into the water and that he needed to get his crew out into the harbor to go and find the victims. Additionally, the RCMP had made some calls, and Coast Guard Cutter 101 and other local boats rushed to aid in the search. When they arrived at the spot of the sighting, all that was left behind was the strange yellow foam. There's no wreck, there's no ship, there was nothing, and no people. The search went on until 3 a.m., where it was called off. Smith reported that the foam was not normal tidal wave foam. One, there wasn't the right weather conditions to make up that kind of foam. And there's also weird conditions about the foam. The foam smelt of burned sulfur. It kind of seemed to sparkle when you would pass a flashlight over it. It was very dense. It didn't dissipate like normal tidal wave. And the sheer amount of the foam also made it very unusual. Smith said that in all his 45 years of fishing, he had never seen foam like that. And he also said that anyone who would have seen that would have just stopped and investigated because it was so unusual. Throughout the operation, the RCMP had also contacted the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax to advise them of a plane crash. The RCC then made an urgent call to the NORAD radar station at Baccaro, Nova Scotia. to get reports on any missing airplanes. An hour later, they were told that there was no missing aircraft reported that evening. So no missing civilian, commercial, or military aircrafts at all. It was at this point that they realized that they weren't dealing with an airplane, that they were dealing with something that was unknown. The day after, the RCC filed a report with the Canadian Forces headquarters in Ottawa that an object of unknown origin had hit the water in Shag Harbour. This prompted the HMCS Granby to be ordered to the location to start a dive. On October 7th, divers started to search the bottom of the harbor to find the wreckage of the craft. The water in Shag Harbour is shallow with a strong current, so the divers believed that if the wreck hadn't been moved to sea by that time, they would find it soon. The search lasted for 2.5 days, and at the end of the search, onlookers saw divers bring up these jagged type of object out of the water, and then they just packed them into a military van, and then that was the end of it. The residents asked the divers what it was, and they said it was simply just the markers that they used to make sure that they did not lose their way when they were searching the bottom of the water. Wilkins, if you remember him, he was the fisherman that was driving with his friends and who saw the plane dive. He had asked an RCMP officer on site if they found out anything about the airplane, and the officer responded that it was determined that it was a UFO, but he wouldn't say more. Now, this obviously was a huge, huge event. Newspapers, like people just went crazy about this. A comic book was made. It was in all of the tabloids. It was all in the newspapers. But once the dive was done and there's no development, it just quickly died. And that's why Shag Harbour, the UFO incident, is often compared to Roswell, but in a more positive manner. This incident drew in a lot of attention, but then it just kind of died off and people were like, something happened, but it doesn't have all of that like skepticism attached to it. Now, the one very interesting thing about this story is our first eyewitness that I talked about earlier, Stiles. He was 12 at the time, and it completely changed his life. It was something that he couldn't stop thinking about. He wanted answers, and to him, like, since the military was involved, since the police was involved, like, there had to have some documents. There had to be proof somewhere that they came out to search a UFO or something. So that prompted him to join MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network, and become an investigator. He joined with another investigator, Doug Ledger, decided to really explore and investigate what happened on October 4th, 1967 in Shag Harbour. The really interesting thing about this is that they actually did uncover a lot more information. There's a lot more to the original story. So the two men interviewed many of the original witnesses and were able to uncover compelling evidence that there truly is more to the story. Ledger said that the Shag Harbour incident is very important, as it is one of the few cases where there are good indication that something truly came close to the shore, as it was seen by multiple and strong witnesses. So there's eyewitness accounts by police, military, so many residents, and all across Nova Scotia. He also said that it was an interesting case because the more you looked into it, the more details came out, and there was all of the details that came out were in favor of the UFO. They're also able to find a military report between Ottawa and Shag Harbour that confirmed that officials truly believe they're dealing with a UFO. So in the documentary, they show the document, and in the margins, you see UFO scratched, like underlined a bunch of times, at least like 3 different parts of the report. Additionally, what makes this a strong case is the amount of testimonies given by the police and military personnel. So the one thing about these eyewitnesses reports too, that to keep in mind, is that they were all given off the record. People did not want to lose their jobs. They didn't want to lose their pension. They just didn't want the negative connotation. But some of the reports, the eyewitness statements, are still pretty strong and interesting to consider. A former staff member of the Canadian Forces NORAD station in Barrington said it had involved a lot of people. It was a big event, and they thought that it was something out of the normal, and everybody inside that room knew what had happened that night, and we were held to secrecy. He then, and this was like a part in the document that like it was kind of weird, and it's like hearsay, but I figured I'll say it because it's weird. He said that his commanding officer had told him that they could see on the radar that a craft entered the inner space somewhere in northwestern Canada. It had wobbled through the atmosphere until it linked into the Atlantic. The craft then almost hit an airplane somewhere in Quebec, and then it had crashed into Shag Harbour, but that there's also another craft tagging it. And after the crash, both UFOs or whatever had moved from Shag Harbour. So like this UFO had like a wild ride that night.
It was like really just all over the place. Seeing the sights in Canada.
There had been like a little truck driving involved, maybe not.
Listen. Know your limit and stay within it, UFOs.
Exactly. I could just imagine that airplane in Quebec. Tabarnak!
Qu'est-ce que la fuck?
So in their investigation, Stiles and Ledger discovered that the dive conducted by the HSMC Granby, so that like dive that that happened on October 7th, wasn't the last development of the case. The divers and witnesses claimed that the object had actually left the area soon after it dove into the water. The object traveled underwater to Government Point in Shelburne, Nova Scotia, which was 25 miles away. And the one thing about Government Point, it's actually a submarine detection base. So they were able, on their sonars, they were able to pick up the object. Canadian and American naval vessels had rushed to the location of the craft to keep track of it. A few days later, a second UFO had joined the first one in what it is believed to be a rescue operation of the first UFO. No one really knows. The Navy then decided to monitor the UFOs for a week. But then suddenly, during that period of observation, the vessels were then called to go look at a Russian submarine that had entered Canadian waters. Now, when that happened, the two UFOs were then seen charging the submarine to then pass it. They crossed to the Gulf of Maine, where witnesses saw the craft shoot out of the sky and just out of view. These claims were corroborated by civilian military witnesses. I mean, it's a wild story. It's when I was listening to the documentary, like I was into it until like the whole like Russian submarine thing. That's where they kind of lost me a bit. They were explaining how like at that period of time, like they were expecting the Soviets to Soviet attack was very possible at that time, and that's why the Americans and the Canadians were involved, and because all three countries were involved, that's why there's so much secrecy about it. But then like compared to all of the other documents and that they had about like the first set of the story, that whole like Government Point and Russian submarine story, that's where it's more eyewitnesses. So I'm not too sure about that part. Disclaimer.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
It's the story. So obviously the UFO in Shag Harbour completely changed their history. It just became part of the history of Shag Harbour. Now, visitors today can go and visit the Shag Harbour Incident Interpretive Center, where they can watch television documentaries, read newspaper articles. They can also look at memorabilia of the event. They can also go up to the UFO gazebo and picnic site to look at the location of where the UFO crashed in the water. Shag Harbour is also host to the annual Shag Harbour UFO Expo, where experts and witnesses can gather and discuss either about different UFO sightings, bring more evidence towards the story. And then a really fun fact. In 2019, the Royal Canadian Mint released a glow-in-the-dark collector's coin of the event. So the Shag Harbour coin is part of their Unexplained Phenomena series. And it's actually like, it's a very cute coin. Like if you Google it, it looks really cool. You can see just some people overlooking the pier and just 4 lights in the sky. And then if you flash a black light, it just flashes even more. Like it's really, really cute. It's really cool.
Kind of want.
Yeah, me too. And that is the story of Shag Harbour.
We'll have to do like a little like tour of like creepy Canada.
That would be so cool.
So it's like what's the biggest city near Shag Harbour?
I don't know, but I can look it up.
Halifax or something? Because it's Nova Scotia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe Halifax. You could fly there.
Mm-hmm.
Drivey.
Be a fun road trip.
Yeah.
You
can go see Round Pound. And what's great is we can go camping in the national park next to Shag Harbour, and we can see a Wendigo. It's
okay. You can camp, and I'll come and pick you up the following day if you're still alive.
No, I'm too big of a baby. I would not have survived outside of the modern times. Like I have no survival instincts in the wilderness.
I barely can survive this society of like anxiety and like social awkwardness. Can you see me try to freaking hunt?
No.
Try to like gather food or anything? Too afraid there's lizards somewhere.
No, I cannot.
Yeah.
Good gravy.
Well, I hope it creeped you guys out. But if you enjoyed it and wish to encourage us, which we really, really would like encouragement, we like to hear that we're doing good things. It's fun. Please follow us wherever you're listening, download the episodes, and leave us a review.
Only if it's a nice one.
Yeah.
But seriously, if there's anything that you want to share with us, or if there's any topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know. And say hi.
Yeah, so if you want to email us, it's cvopodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, again at Creepy Vibes Only Podcast. And that's it.
Thanks for vibing with us, guys. It's your 2 best friends are signing off.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye. At the same time, RCMP Constable Round Pound was driving down Highway 3.
Wait, what's his name?
Round Pound. What did I say?
Round Pound. Is that his name?
Ron Pound.
Round Pound. You can appreciate my wait a second.